The most crowded room can hold the loneliest person. They're surrounded by admirers, showered with attention. Yet inside, there's an emptiness so vast it could swallow galaxies. This isn't poetic exaggeration. This is the mathematical certainty of a life built on a single fatal miscalculation. When you ignore empathy, you don't just lose connection with others. You lose connection with the very source of what makes life meaningful. The loneliness from narcissism isn't ordinary loneliness. It's not being alone on a Friday night. It's being alone inside your own life, even when you're with people. The narcissistic pattern doesn't start with cruelty. It starts with a simple decision. That your perspective is the only one that matters. Your feelings are the only ones worth considering. Your needs are the only ones that count. And in the beginning, this decision feels empowering. You think you're choosing strength. You think you're choosing self-preservation. What you're actually choosing is isolation. But you won't know that for years, maybe decades. Here's where it gets truly fascinating. The human psyche has this built-in mechanism. We're wired for connection, not as a luxury, as a survival requirement. Your brain literally needs other people's emotional reality to function properly. When you cut yourself off from empathy, you're not just being unkind, you're severing your own lifeline. Think about the last time you truly felt seen by another person. Not admired, not praised, seen. They understood something about you that you didn't have to explain. That moment did something to you physiologically. It released oxytocin. It calmed your nervous system. It told your body you were safe. Now think about what happens when you never give that experience to anyone else. When every interaction is about managing impressions, controlling narratives, you become a performer in your own life. And performers don't have audiences, they have spectators. The narcissistic mind creates a very specific kind of prison. The bars are made of self-reference. Every conversation circles back to you. Every problem is interpreted through how it affects you. Every person is evaluated based on what they can do for you. But you're training your brain to be incapable of the very experiences that create meaning. Joy doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being so absorbed in something beyond yourself that you forget to monitor how you're being perceived. Love doesn't come from being desired. It comes from caring more about another person's well-being than your own image. You're cutting yourself off from these experiences, not because you're evil, not because you're broken, but because you made a calculation error. You thought the self was the center of the universe. It's not. The self is a meeting place, a crossroads where your consciousness intersects with everyone else's. Let me tell you about a pattern I've seen repeatedly. A person builds their entire identity around being impressive. They curate their life like a museum exhibit. Perfect career, perfect appearance, perfect stories to tell at parties. And people are impressed. The strategy works for a while, but then something happens. They realize they can't remember the last time they had a real conversation. Hundreds of connections, zero intimacy, admiration but no affection, attention but no understanding. And the question that haunts them becomes unbearable. Does anyone actually know me? Not the performance, not the persona, me. The answer is usually no. You can't be known if you're not willing to know others. The mechanism is reciprocal. When you practice empathy, when you genuinely try to understand another person's inner world, something happens in your own consciousness. You become more transparent to yourself. But when you refuse empathy, when you treat other people's feelings as irrelevant data, you don't just lose access to them. You lose access to yourself. You become opaque to your own awareness. Your emotions become this confusing static. You feel things but can't name them. You want things but can't identify them. This is where the loneliness becomes truly devastating. You're not just lonely for other people, you're lonely for yourself. You're estranged from your own inner life, and you have no idea why everything feels so empty. You might be thinking, I'm not a narcissist, this doesn't apply to me. But let me ask you something. How many conversations did you have this week where you genuinely tried to understand the other person's perspective without relating it back to your own experience? How many times did you feel someone else's pain and let it matter to you without immediately trying to fix it or minimize it? Narcissism isn't a personality type, it's a spectrum. We all move in and out of narcissistic patterns depending on our fear levels and stress. The question is whether you're aware of it, whether you catch yourself, whether you course correct. Because here's the truth that will either liberate you or terrify you. You are creating your own loneliness. Not through circumstances, not through bad luck, through the daily choices you make about how much you're willing to let other people's reality matter. Every time you dismiss someone's feelings because they're inconvenient, every time you interrupt because your story is more interesting, you're building the walls of your own isolation, brick by brick. And the cruelest part? You won't notice it happening. The walls go up so gradually. You'll have explanations for everything. They're too sensitive, they're too demanding, they don't understand you. The common denominator in all these failed connections? It's you, but you'll be the last person to see it. Let me tell you what happens in the relationships of people who've disconnected from empathy. They go through partners like they're trying on clothes. This one is too needy. That one is too independent. This one doesn't appreciate them enough. That one is too critical. There's always a reason why it didn't work. And the reason is always the other person's failing. But here's what's actually happening. They're encountering the same problem in every relationship. The problem is intimacy itself. Real intimacy requires vulnerability. It requires letting someone see you when you're not impressive, when you're confused, when you're wrong, when you're scared. And if you've built your entire identity around being admirable, vulnerability feels like death, so you avoid it. You keep things surface level. You share the highlight reel. You never share the struggle. And then you wonder why no one really knows you. You want to know the most painful moment in a narcissist's life? It's not when people leave. People always leave, eventually. The painful moment is when they realize they've been alone the entire time. Even when they were with someone, especially when they were with someone, because they were so busy managing how they were perceived, they never actually connected. They were performing intimacy, not experiencing it. And you can't fake your way to real connection. The psyche knows the difference. Your body knows the difference too. There's actual research on this now. People who lack empathetic connections show higher cortisol levels, more inflammation, faster cognitive decline. The isolation isn't just emotional, it's physiological. Your body is literally deteriorating from the lack of genuine human connection. But let's talk about something even more immediate. Let's talk about what happens in your daily life when you're operating from this place. You wake up and there's this vague sense of dissatisfaction. You can't quite name it. You have everything you thought you wanted, yet something feels off, wrong, empty. You check your social media. You see the likes, the comments, the validation. It feels good for about 30 seconds. Then the emptiness returns. Because external validation is like junk, food for the soul. It gives you a quick hit, but it never nourishes you. You go to work, you perform brilliantly, you get praise, recognition, maybe a promotion. And again, there's that momentary satisfaction, followed by the return of the void. Because achievement without connection is just lonely success. You come home, maybe there's someone there, maybe there isn't. Either way, you feel alone. If someone's there, you go through the motions, you talk about your day, but you're editing as you speak, making yourself sound good, leaving out the parts that don't fit your self-image. And they're doing the same thing because you've created a relationship where authenticity feels unsafe. So you're both alone, together, going through the choreography of intimacy without the substance of it. This is what narcissistic loneliness looks like. It's not dramatic. It's not obvious. It's just this persistent, low-grade emptiness that colors everything, like living in a world where all the colors are slightly muted, all the flavors are slightly bland, all the experiences are slightly hollow. And here's what you need to understand. This isn't happening to you. You're creating it every single day through 1,000 small choices to prioritize your ego over connection, your image over authenticity, your comfort over growth. Now, some of you are feeling defensive right now. You're thinking, but I do care about people. I'm generous. I'm kind. And maybe you are. But let me ask you this. Do you care about people, or do you care about being seen as someone who cares about people? Do you help others because their suffering moves you, or because helping makes you feel good about yourself? Do you listen to understand, or do you listen to formulate your response? These distinctions matter. Because the ego is incredibly sophisticated, it can masquerade as virtue. It can dress up self-interest as compassion. Real empathy is uncomfortable. It means feeling things you don't want to feel. It means making yourself smaller so someone else can be bigger. It means setting aside your agenda to genuinely receive someone else's reality. And if you're not willing to do that, you don't have empathy. You have empathy-flavored self-interest. Here's a test. Think about the last time someone was really struggling. Not in a way that was convenient for you to address. Not in a way that made you look good. But really struggling, messy, complicated, no easy answers. Did you show up for that, or did you minimize it, distance yourself, get uncomfortable, and change the subject? Your answer to that question tells you everything you need to know about where you are on this spectrum, because the narcissistic defense is always the same. When confronted with someone else's pain, the narcissistic mind immediately asks, how does this affect me? How does this make me feel? What do I need to do to make this feeling stop? The empathetic mind asks different questions. What are they experiencing? What do they need? How can I be present for this? You see the difference? One set of questions keeps you trapped in yourself. The other set liberates you into connection. And connection is the only antidote to loneliness. Not just any connection, real connection. The kind that requires you to get over yourself. Let me tell you what happens when you start practicing real empathy. At first, it's exhausting. You're not used to it. You're used to being the center of your own universe. Suddenly, you're trying to understand someone else's universe. It takes effort, concentration, a willingness to be changed by what you discover. But then something shifts. You start to notice that when you're genuinely present for someone else, you're more present for yourself. When you're really listening to someone, you're also really listening to your own thoughts. When you're letting someone's emotions matter, you're also letting your own emotions matter. The mechanism is reciprocal. You can't open to others without opening to yourself. You can't close off from others without closing off from yourself. This is the fundamental equation that narcissism gets wrong. And here's what starts to happen as you practice this. The loneliness begins to lift, not because you suddenly have more friends, but because you're actually with people when you're with them. You're not performing, you're not managing, you're not strategizing, you're just there, present, open, available. And people feel it, they respond to it, not with admiration, with trust, with their own authenticity, with their own vulnerability. And suddenly you're in a real relationship, not a transaction, not a performance, a relationship. You know, what's interesting, people who've healed from narcissistic patterns often say the same thing. They say, I didn't know what I was missing until I experienced it. They thought they were fine. They thought their way of relating was normal. Then they experienced genuine connection. And they realized they'd been starving themselves their entire lives. It's like someone who's never tasted real food. They've only had synthetic substitutes. They think they know what eating is. Then someone gives them an actual meal made with actual ingredients. And they realize they've never really tasted anything before. That's what empathy does. It's not just a nice thing to do. It's not just about being a good person. It's about accessing the full spectrum of human experience. Without it, you're living in black and white. With it, you're living in color. But here's the hard part, and I want to be really honest with you about this. Developing empathy when you've been narcissistic requires you to face some painful truths. You have to acknowledge the harm you've caused, the relationships you've damaged, the people you've hurt. Not because they were bad people, but because they weren't useful to you. You have to sit with the shame of that. And shame is the feeling narcissism exists to avoid. So this is terrifying. The ego will fight you every step of the way. It will tell you that you were justified, that they deserved it, that you had no choice. These are lies, comfortable lies, but lies nonetheless. The truth is harder. The truth is you chose your comfort over their humanity. You chose your image over their feelings. You chose your narrative over their reality. And you did it repeatedly, habitually, unconsciously perhaps. But you did it, and now you're paying the price. The price is loneliness. The price is that hollow feeling that never quite goes away. You know, the price is waking up one day and realizing you've been absent from your own life. You've been so busy managing how people see you that you forgot to actually be someone worth seeing. This is the moment of reckoning. This is where you either double down on the narcissistic patterns or you surrender to the work of becoming whole. And I want to tell you right now, the work is hard, but the alternative is harder. The alternative is spending the rest of your life alone inside your own head. And that's not living, that's existing. So what does the work look like? It starts with honesty, brutal, uncomfortable honesty. You look at your patterns, the ways you manipulate conversations, the ways you make everything about you, the ways you dismiss other people's experiences. You see these things clearly, without justification. This is humbling. The ego hates being humbled, but humility is the doorway to connection. You can't connect from superiority, only from equality, shared humanity, mutual vulnerability. So you start small, you have a conversation where you don't interrupt, where you don't redirect attention to yourself, where you genuinely try to understand what the other person is saying, not so you can respond, but so you can know them. It feels weird at first, uncomfortable, like you're playing a role, but you stay with it. You keep doing it, and gradually something shifts. You realize you're actually interested in what they're saying. Not because it relates to you, but because they're interesting. Their inner world is rich and complex and nothing like yours. And that's fascinating. This is the beginning, the moment when other people become real to you. Not as supporting characters in your story, but as full human beings with their own stories. Stories that matter just as much as yours, maybe more. And when you start relating to people this way, everything changes. The quality of your relationships transforms, the depth of your conversations increases, the sense of isolation decreases, because you're not alone anymore. You're part of something larger than yourself. You're part of the human family. But I need to tell you something important. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. You're rewiring neural pathways established for years, maybe decades. You're going against conditioning, against habit, against the ego's primary directive. There will be days when you slip back, when you make someone struggle about you, when you get defensive instead of curious. This is normal. The question is what you do when you notice you've slipped. Do you justify it or do you acknowledge it? Do you double down or do you course correct? These micro choices determine the trajectory of your growth. Every time you choose accountability over defense, you're building new neural pathways. You're becoming someone different, someone more whole. And here's what nobody tells you about this process. As you become more empathetic, you become more powerful. Not power from control, power from authenticity. When you're not wasting energy on image management, you have more energy for everything else. When you're not defending a false self, you can bring your real self everywhere. People trust this. They respond to it. They want to be around it because authentic presence is rare. Most people are so busy performing, they've forgotten how to just be. When you show up as someone who's just being, it's magnetic. Not because you're trying to be magnetic, but because you're real. This is the great irony. The narcissist seeks admiration and ends up lonely. The empathetic person seeks connection and ends up admired. Not because they're seeking admiration, but because people admire authenticity. They admire someone who's done the work to become whole. Now, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked in these conversations, the relationship between narcissism and fear. Because at the root of narcissistic patterns, there's always fear. Fear of being ordinary, fear of being insignificant, fear of not mattering, fear of being unloved for who you really are. And here's the tragedy. The strategies you develop to avoid these fears guarantee they come true. You avoid being ordinary by constantly performing extraordinariness, and you become exhaustingly predictable. You avoid insignificance by demanding attention, and people tune you out. You avoid not mattering by making everything about you, and you become irrelevant to other people's lives. You avoid being unloved by never showing who you really are, and you ensure you'll never experience real love. Every defense creates the very thing it's trying to prevent. This is the fundamental paradox of the ego. It promises protection but delivers isolation. It promises significance but delivers meaninglessness. It promises love but delivers loneliness. So the work of healing isn't about becoming a better version of your defended self. It's about putting down the defenses entirely. It's about facing the fears that created them. It's about discovering that you can survive being ordinary, insignificant, and unloved. And in fact, when you stop fighting these fears, they lose their power over you. You discover that being ordinary is actually liberating. You don't have to maintain an image, you can just be. You discover that insignificance, in the cosmic sense, doesn't mean your life lacks meaning. It means you're part of something larger than yourself. You discover that the love you were afraid of losing was conditional love based on performance. Real love, the kind that heals, comes when you're just you. But you have to be willing to risk it. You have to be willing to show up without the armor, to have the conversation where you're not the hero, to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know, I'm confused, I'm scared, I need help. These moments are terrifying for the narcissistic mind. They feel like death. And in a sense they are. They're the death of the false self, the self that's been running the show for so long you've forgotten it's not the real you. But here's what happens when you let that false self die. The real you gets to live. The you that feels things deeply. The you that connects authentically. The you that's capable of joy and pain and love and fear and all the messy, complicated, beautiful experiences that make life worth living. This you has been there all along, buried under layers of defense, trapped behind walls of self-protection, waiting for the moment you'd be brave enough to let it out. And the moment you do, the loneliness begins to dissolve. Because the loneliness was never about other people, it was about your separation from yourself. You've been lonely for you, the real you, the one you've been hiding, the one you thought wasn't good enough, the one you were afraid people would reject. That's who you've been missing. And when you finally meet that part of yourself, when you finally let it exist in the world, everything shifts. People still might reject you, that's true, but some people will see you, really see you, and they'll love what they see. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And real connection can only happen between real people, not personas, not performances, people. This is what's on the other side of empathy, not just connection with others, connection with yourself, the kind of self-connection that makes loneliness impossible. Because even when you're alone, you're with someone you actually like, someone you actually know, someone who's actually there. Let me tell you about the moment you'll know you've shifted. You'll be in a conversation. Someone will be talking about their life, their struggles, their joy. And you'll realize you're not thinking about what you're going to say next. You're not comparing their experience to yours. You're not judging whether their response to their situation is right or wrong. You're just listening, really listening, receiving them. And in that moment, you'll feel something you haven't felt in a long time, maybe ever. You'll feel connected. Not because they're connecting to you, but because you're connecting to them. You're in their world with them. You're understanding their experience from the inside. You're letting their reality matter. And it doesn't feel like sacrifice. It doesn't feel like you're giving something up. It feels like expansion, like you're becoming more by focusing on them. Like the boundaries between you and them are less rigid than you thought, like you're both part of the same thing. This is empathy, not as a concept, as a lived experience. And once you've tasted it, once you know what it feels like, you can't go back to the old way, because the old way feels dead by comparison. Hollow, empty, lonely. The loneliness of narcissism isn't just about being alone, it's about being dead to life while you're living it. It's about being so trapped in your own head that you miss everything that's actually happening. The beauty, the connection, the love, the meaning, it's all there. But you can't access it from behind the walls of self-involvement. So the question you have to ask yourself is this: do you want to be right, or do you want to be connected? Do you want to be impressive, or do you want to be known? Do you want to win every interaction, or do you want to experience actual intimacy? You can't have both. The ego and the heart are incompatible operating systems. One is designed to protect you from life. The other is designed to let you experience it. You have to choose every day, every interaction, every moment. And here's what I want you to understand. This isn't a moral choice. I'm not telling you that empathy is virtuous and narcissism is evil. I'm telling you that one leads to connection and the other leads to loneliness. One leads to aliveness and the other leads to numbness. One leads to meaning and the other leads to emptiness. You get to choose which life you want to live. But you don't get to avoid the consequences of your choice. The consequences are built into the structure of reality. Ignore empathy, experience loneliness. It's not a punishment. It's a natural result. Like jumping off a building results in falling. Gravity isn't being mean, it's just being gravity. The same is true for the laws of human connection. They're not moral judgments. They're descriptions of how things work. You can't have intimacy without vulnerability. You can't have connection without empathy. You can't have meaning without letting things matter beyond yourself. These aren't suggestions. They're requirements. So what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to defend your patterns? Justify your behavior? Tell yourself that you're different, that this doesn't apply to you? Or are you going to let this land? Are you going to feel the truth of it in your body? Are you going to acknowledge what you've been avoiding? Because the loneliness you feel isn't an accident. It's feedback. It's your psyche telling you something's wrong, something's missing, something needs to change. And what needs to change isn't your circumstances. It's your orientation to life. You need to stop making yourself the center of every story. You need to start letting other people's experiences matter as much as yours. You need to practice being curious about inner worlds that aren't your own. You need to develop the capacity to be moved by someone else's joy or pain. This is the work, not the work of self-improvement, the work of becoming human, fully human, the kind of human who can love and be loved, who can know and be known, who can give and receive, who can be alone without being lonely because they're not estranged from themselves. This is what's possible for you, not someday, now. Today, in the next conversation you have, in the next interaction you navigate, you can choose differently. You can respond from empathy instead of ego. You can prioritize connection over control. And every time you do, you're building a different life. A life where loneliness isn't the default state, where isolation isn't the price of safety, where you actually get to experience the full spectrum of what it means to be alive. The narcissist's loneliness is the cost of ignoring empathy. But it's not a fixed price, it's not a life sentence, it's a current reality that can change the moment you decide to pay attention to someone other than yourself. The moment you let someone else's inner world matter, the moment you choose connection over self-protection, that moment is available to you right now. Not after you've changed everything about yourself, not after you've fixed all your flaws. Now, in your current state, with all your imperfections, you can choose to show up differently, to listen more deeply, to care more genuinely, to be more present. And when you do, the loneliness will begin to dissolve, not because you found the perfect people, but because you've become someone capable of real connection. Someone who's not trapped in themselves, someone who's available for life. This is the gift on the other side of this work. Not just better relationships, a better relationship with reality itself. You stop experiencing life as something that's happening to you and start experiencing it as something you're participating in. You stop being a spectator and become a contributor. You stop being isolated and become integrated. And the loneliness that once felt like your constant companion becomes a memory, a reminder of who you were before you learned to let other people matter. Before you learned that your significance doesn't come from being more important than everyone else. It comes from being part of everyone else, part of the human story. Part of the great unfolding of consciousness becoming aware of itself through relationship. You are not separate, you never were. The loneliness you feel is the pain of pretending you are. The joy that awaits you is the recognition that you're not, that you're connected to everything and everyone, that empathy isn't a skill you develop, it's a truth you remember. You are part of a larger whole. When you hurt others, you hurt yourself. When you ignore others, you ignore yourself. When you love others, you love yourself. Not metaphorically, actually, because the boundaries between self and other are far more permeable than the ego wants you to believe. So let them be permeable. Let yourself be affected by other people. Let their joy move you. Let their pain touch you. Let their reality matter as much as your own. This isn't weakness. This is the strength required to actually live, to actually connect, to actually matter. The cost of ignoring empathy is loneliness, but the reward of embracing it is everything else, everything that makes life worth living, everything that transforms existence, from something you endure into something you celebrate, everything that makes you feel alive instead of just existing. You've always had this choice every single day, in every interaction, in every moment of your life. The question isn't whether you can choose differently. The question is whether you will.